All right, all right. So I want to tap to the small debate Mr. Research, Mr. Fantastic had today. Uh, so something that can benefit the community. This debate is very good, and hopefully, I'm going to take a snippet from the panel Mr. Fantastic and I were just on. And hopefully it helps others grow in their debating skills. But remember this, the debate Fantastic and I had, nobody was truly wrong, but we all wasted 40 minutes of time. And I think that's important. Um, Mr. Fantastic is not a I like the brain that Mr. Fantastic has. But I will side with Gabe on one thing that Fantastic does. He has to interrupt you to defeat you. He 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 doesn't allow the other person to fully get out their thing. Um, but outside of that, a lot of things is harder for people to defeat him on because he has a point, and a lot of times the point that the other person is making hasn't defeated Fantastic's point. So kudos to him for having that ability. The only problem is he has to really interrupt you and scream you down to defeat you. He doesn't let his facts stand on his own. But aside from that, I just want you guys to kind of really understand how good this is. This is about perception. Okay, so perception. We're going to use the 6 and 9. This goes to perception. So Fantastic and I, Fantastic was having a discussion with the rest of the panel about resource. Resource is something in its raw state. Let's just say that. But other people's perception of resource have to do with how they apply that word. It doesn't mean nobody's wrong. Okay. But we wasted 40 minutes on Ramil's show talking about resources because each side didn't understand that they were both correct. Hit the thumbs up. If you here watching, hit the thumbs up. I know you're trying to check out what I'm talking about, but make sure you hit the thumbs up. So here's the thing. We were talking about resources. Resources in the context of stocks, trading, it has to do with something raw. Okay. But the way that the younger people were using the word resources, they're using it from the standpoint of what they're getting. Let me say it again. The word within itself, money, staff, that's raw. That's something raw. Okay. Money is raw. Staff is a raw usage. But let's use staff real quick. Okay. So staff by definition is resource. Okay. But to one person, the receptionist is resource. They're not wrong in that. They're not wrong in that because technically that receptionist is staff. But let's take it a little bit further because this is what the young people tend to do. Instead of saying staff, let's say they say the newspaper guy is a resource. The guy who delivers Shout out to you, sir. Shout out to you, sir. Uh, the guy who delivers the newspaper is a resource. Well, according to me and Mr. Fantastic, the way we view resource, no, the newspaper itself is a resource, or the journalist is a resource, or the newspaper company is a resource. But you can't say the paper boy is a resource. Well, when it comes to perception, for that young person who values the newspaper boy can be perceived as a resource. Now, for me and for maybe Mr. Fantastic, that is childish thinking. But we can't knock it. We can't spend 40 minutes knocking what those people perceive it as, because if the newspaper boy is a resource, that I can't knock it because you view that as a resource. It's the same thing as the word valuable. People try to say, well, everybody's valuable. Everybody should get a trophy. If that's your perception. But over here, where it's life and death, ain't no trophies given out. The fact that you're still breathing is your trophy. See, these are two different perceptions. These are two different perceptions. So perception is always like when you're looking at the number 6 and you're looking at the number 9. It depends on where you're standing. That's how you're going to perceive that number. If you're standing below, you're going to perceive that as a 6. But if you're below is another version of below, you're going to see that as a 9. It's where you're standing. It's how you value it. So what's so sad is they spent like 30 minutes arguing. And I just wish Fantastic would kind of understand sometimes you've already dominated the floor. Nobody's really able to defeat what you're saying. You as the most powerful person in the room, Fantastic, you got to let it go at that point. And it's something that I learned too. When you're sitting up here talking with people, don't get caught up in proving that you're wrong or proving that you're right, because sometimes these people still think woolly mammoths are walking the earth. These people think, and look, we can't say that they are, but like me and Mr. Fantastic was telling the people on the panel, but can you prove it other than saying, believe me? See, that was the strength of Fantastic's point. You had people just kept saying, believe me, believe me. No, 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 no. Fantastic said, well, how is that? Just believe me. And Fantastic is like, well, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Just believe you. Just believe you. And so what's the part of being on the panel if you're just going to make a speech? And see, that's the thing that catches so many people up in this Black manosphere, is that people are making speeches, but they're not necessarily pointing to information. If you notice, and I'm gonna put the clip up again, if you notice, when I said how many people lost money and the year that they lost it, and I gave the names of the people, none of the people could contest that because it's documented. This is why you always hear me say I use documented facts. I don't just make speeches. When I come to a panel, I come to a panel to help people with documented information, not just some book I read or some book some white person wrote. I don't do that. Now, let's also talk about sensationalism. Sensationalism is something Black people do, which is gas up a situation they have improved. So this is the part where I disagree with people like Gabe. Gabe will say, because I won in 2017, that means people won back in 2012 and people will win in 2020. Well, Gabe can't say that. No matter how many times Gabe tries to laugh and make it seem like people don't get it or people are trying to one up him, the strength of Gabe's argument, and I'm going to use something positive by Gabe because Gabe gets upset. So I'm going to use something positive by Gabe. Gabe's argument is always because I'm currently winning, therefore you're always going to be able to win with what I'm doing. That ain't necessarily true. If I start working at McDonald's back in 1980, it paid more back then than what it pays now. Well, that don't make no sense, Mr. Research. How could they pay more back then than what they pay now? Because it's documented that they did. The money may look smaller because it was $3, but it stretched longer than your $9, $10, $13 now. So therefore, by mathematical proximity, they made more money because the dollar stretched longer. So it's these type of things people get confused on. Well, inflation is something that is treasury created. So there is no true inflation. There is no true inflation. Okay, because treasury moves the needle, and then therefore inflation happens. So uh, it just depends. Okay, like for example, Trump did not want his treasurer to move the needle, so therefore nothing happened against the market. But when Dick Cheney messed up everything, now please go look this up. When Dick Cheney messed up everything and he messed up the economy, when Obama came in, they had to move the needle to stop the downfall of the goal that they have. So there is no true inflation. Inflation happens only when that president and that treasurer agreed to allow inflation to happen. Um, Case in point, there was no inflation under President Ford. This is my proof. There was no inflation under Jimmy Carter. This is my proof. But when Ronald Reagan took over, all of a sudden, him and his treasurer decided that there would be a thing called inflation. When Ronald Reagan left, there was inflation under Bush, but then all of a sudden, inflation disappeared under Clinton. Again, inflation is a treasury creep. When you look at it, you'll understand. Hey, good afternoon, actual factual. I did respond to your my post. Everybody go check out make sure you check out my wolf video where I talked to the young lady. I have like 3 sexual friends. This is another reason why I'm not mad at women. And I kind of let you guys know in that discussion I'm having with her, it's just a normal thing. TARP. Well, TARP, how can I explain TARP? TARP, Jesus. Look, here's the problem with TARP as a whole. Um, Wall Street really controls how they get bailed out. Okay. Wall Street controls how they get bailed out. So it's been like that since Wall Street has this thing. Okay, let me put it this way. It's not always been TARP. TARP has not always existed. Okay. So what I don't like discussing with the black community about is things that white people created to save themselves from their own fuck ups. Let's say it again. I don't like talking about after they have fucked up. So TARP is another one of those 3 things, but it's really Wall Street created. It's like, look, we screwed up. Help us out. That's why people use the terms like Main Street, and they always need Main Street people like you and I get them out of something they shouldn't have been doing in the first place. So once and just to recap for those people who came in late, Sir was here first. Um, the debate Fantastic and I had was about perceptions. Perceptions. If we both looking at a 6 and a 9, depending on where we stand, we're gonna call it a 6. We're gonna call it a 9. But what we can't do is waste 40 minutes on the panel arguing or trying to convince people uh, to agree with our 9, because where they're standing, it may be a 6. Inflation is an effect, is an effect that occurs in our economic cycle. Who controls the effect? Who do you believe in controls the effect? And once you understand who controls the effect, because even you just said it's an effect, it's an effect, then you'll know how it don't even have to exist. It's kind of like me saying inflation is kind of like me saying, okay, because in order for inflation to happen, inflation has two sources, like oxygen and carbon dioxide. So a human has our oxygen and carbon dioxide. We in oxygen and we spew out carbon dioxide. Okay. Inflation happens because somebody has used a bank some way, somehow. Somebody has used credit some way, somehow. If you don't use credit to do what you need to do, you will not have inflation. Period. Inflation is something somebody chose. It's the effect of somebody choosing to use a credit card as opposed to waiting 2 months later and using the actual paycheck. Now you've used the credit card. Now a year has passed and you owe more than what you originally borrowed on the credit card because of the interest. You could have solved the problem by not using the credit card and just waiting 2 months until you had the actual money. So this is why I say inflation. I don't like talking about inflation because inflation want to take credit for something or move the needle. No, it's not a policy. No, it's not a policy. No, it's not a policy. Inflation is a result of what happens when somebody uses credit. Now you can't pay it, and now you're behind. You're behind. Or if somebody moves the decimal needle at the Treasury, and you're behind. Look what happened at war after World War II. Yeah, they took credit. You're proving my point. I'm sounding like Mr. Fantastic now. You're proving my point. Yes, they use credit. If you don't use credit, you won't have an inflation problem, period. If you don't use credit, you won't have an inflation problem. But if you choose to use credit, you're going to have an inflation problem unless you're able to pay it all back before the time expires that you're supposed to pay it back. So a lot of these inflation issues that the government has had has been because people got turned upside down. Henceforth, inflation. All right, so I've had enough of this video. Again, he says, look that up. Much love to everybody that came through. Talk to you later. Peace.